The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Seoul High School as Lee Hana walked into her mathematics classroom. She carried her heavy backpack filled with textbooks and notebooks covered in neat handwriting. At 17 years old, Hana had the same worries as most students her age. Would she pass the university entrance exam? Could she get into a good teaching program? Would her parents be proud of her grades? Hana took her usual seat in the third row and pulled out her calculator. Mathematics had always been her strongest subject, but today the numbers seemed to dance across the page without making sense. She rubbed her tired eyes and tried to focus on the quadratic equations written on the blackboard. "Hana, can you help me with this problem?" whispered her best friend Park Jimin from the seat beside her. Jimin held up her worksheet with a confused expression on her face. Hana smiled and leaned over to look at the problem. This was what she loved most about school. Not the tests or the pressure from teachers, but the moment when she could help someone understand something new. She had dreamed of becoming a teacher like her mother ever since she was a little girl. "Look at this part here," Hana said quietly, pointing to the equation with her pencil. "You need to move this number to the other side first. Then you can solve for x." Jimin's face brightened as she worked through the steps. "Oh, I see it now. Thank you, Hana. You explain things so much better than our teacher does." The classroom filled with the scratching sound of pencils on paper as 30 students worked on their morning assignment. Outside the window, Hana could see the busy streets of Seoul. Cars moved in endless streams between tall buildings that reached toward the sky. People hurried along the sidewalks, probably heading to work or school, just like she was. When the bell rang for lunch break, Hana packed her books and walked to the cafeteria with Jimin. They bought rice bowls and found seats at their favorite table near the window. The food was warm and filling, and Hana felt grateful for this simple pleasure. "My mother asked about your college plans yesterday," Jimin said between bites of rice. "She thinks you should study business instead of education. Teachers don't make much money," she says. Hana had heard this advice many times before. Her own parents sometimes worried about her choice too. But when she imagined her future, she saw herself standing in front of a classroom, helping students discover new ideas and solve problems. Money seemed less important than finding meaning in her work. "I want to help people learn," Hana said simply. "My mother always says that teaching is the most important job in the world. Teachers shape the future by shaping young minds." After lunch, Hana had her favorite class of the day, literature. Today they were reading poems about hope and dreams. The teacher, Mrs. Song, had a gentle voice that made even the most difficult poems seem beautiful and clear. "What do you think this poet means when she writes about reaching for stars?" Mrs. Song asked the class. Hana raised her hand. "I think she means that we should never stop trying to achieve our dreams, even if they seem impossible. The stars are very far away, but they give us light to see by." Mrs. Song nodded approvingly. "Very good, Hana. You understand that literature is about more than just words on a page. It's about the human spirit and our desire to grow and become better." When school ended, Hana walked home through the crowded streets. She lived in a small apartment with her parents and younger sister Choi Minji. Her father worked at a bank, and her mother taught elementary school. They were not wealthy, but they were happy and close to each other. That evening, Hana sat at her desk doing homework while Minji watched television in the living room. The math problems that had seemed so difficult in the morning now made perfect sense. She worked steadily through each equation, feeling satisfied when she found the right answers. Before going to bed, Hana looked out her bedroom window at the city lights twinkling in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring another day of classes, another step toward her dream of becoming a teacher. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow would also bring something that would change her world forever. She fell asleep thinking about lesson plans and wondering what it would feel like to have her own classroom full of eager students. In her dreams, she stood before a blackboard, explaining mathematical concepts to young faces that looked up at her with understanding and gratitude. It was a simple dream, but it filled her heart with purpose and hope for the future that lay ahead. Hana was solving algebra problems during her first period math class when the principal's voice crackled through the school speakers. His words were shaky and filled with fear that made every student in the room look up from their desks. All students and teachers must remain calm. Large objects have appeared in the sky above our city. We are waiting for information from the government. Please stay in your classrooms until we receive further instructions. Hana felt her heart begin to beat faster. She looked at Jimin, who had gone pale and was gripping her pencil tightly. Around the classroom, 30 students began whispering to each other in worried voices. Their math teacher, Mr. Kim, walked to the window and pulled back the curtains. "My goodness," he whispered, and his face turned white as paper. Every student rushed to the windows despite Mr. Kim's protests. What Hana saw made her legs feel weak and unsteady. Hanging in the blue morning sky above Seoul was something that should not exist. A massive metal structure stretched across the horizon like a dark cloud. It was shaped like no airplane or building she had ever seen. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt her eyes to look at. "What is that thing?" Jimin whispered, pressing her face against the glass. Before anyone could answer, more shapes appeared in the sky. Smaller objects dropped from the giant structure like seeds falling from a tree. As they came closer, Hana could see they were vehicles of some kind. They moved without making any sound, gliding through the air as smoothly as fish swimming through water. The school's old television was wheeled into the classroom, and Mr. Kim turned on the news. The reporter's voice was professional, but Hana could hear the fear underneath his calm words. Similar objects have appeared over major cities worldwide. Military officials are attempting to establish communication with what appear to be visitors from another world. Citizens are advised to remain indoors and await further instructions. Hana watched as the news showed the same impossible sight in different cities. Tokyo, Beijing, New York, London. Everywhere the same massive ships hung in the sky like hungry predators watching their prey. Then the broadcast changed. A new voice filled the television speakers. It was not human. The sounds were harsh and clicking, like metal scraping against stone. But somehow, impossibly, Hana could understand the meaning behind the alien words. "People of Earth, we are the Keth Empire. Your world now belongs to us. You will surrender immediately. Those who resist will be destroyed. Those who obey will be allowed to serve our great purpose. You have one day to decide." The transmission ended, leaving the classroom in complete silence. Hana felt as if the world had suddenly become unreal, like she was trapped inside a terrible dream that she could not wake up from. The silence was broken by a sound that made everyone's blood turn cold. A deep rumbling came from outside, followed by a flash of light brighter than the sun. The windows rattled in their frames, and several students screamed. "That was the Air Force Base," Mr. Kim said in a hollow voice. "It's 20 kilometers from here." Through the window, Hana could see a pillar of black smoke rising into the sky where the military base had been. In just a few seconds, hundreds of soldiers and pilots had been turned to ash. The message was clear. The aliens were not making empty threats. More explosions followed throughout the morning. Each flash of light meant another military installation was gone. The government's attempts to fight back were ending before they could begin. Hana realized with growing horror that Earth's armies were like children throwing stones at tanks. By noon, the alien ships began landing in the city. They settled onto buildings and parks with no regard for what they crushed beneath them. Strange machines emerged from the ships and began scanning everything around them. They moved through the streets like mechanical spiders, recording and measuring. Hana pressed her face to the classroom window and watched her normal world disappear forever. The coffee shop where she bought treats after school was now covered by a metallic alien structure. The park where she used to read books was filled with creatures that walked on too many legs. "We need to get home to our families," Jimin said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Mr. Kim shook his head. "The principal says we must stay here. It's too dangerous outside." As the sun began to set, Hannah realized that her biggest worry was no longer passing her university entrance exam. Her biggest worry was whether she would live to see tomorrow. The girl who had fallen asleep dreaming of teaching children was now trapped in a world where childhood itself might be ending. She thought of her parents and little sister Minji at home, and wondered if she would ever see them again. 1 week had passed since the alien ships arrived. Hannah crouched in the basement of her school along with 20 other students and 3 teachers. They had been hiding there since the second day when the Keth soldiers began collecting humans from the streets above. The basement was cold and dark. They had only a few bottles of water and some rice crackers that Mr. Kim had found in the teacher's lounge. Everyone whispered when they spoke, afraid that the aliens might hear them through the thick concrete walls. Hannah sat against the wall with her knees pulled up to her chest. She had not seen her parents or sister Minji since the invasion began. The not knowing was worse than hunger or fear. She closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's voice reading bedtime stories. "They're coming back," whispered Jimin from her spot near the small window. She had been watching the alien patrol patterns for days now. Everyone in the basement went completely silent. Through the thick walls, they could hear the mechanical sounds of Keth scanning devices. The aliens sent these machines to search buildings every few hours, looking for humans who had not yet been captured. Hannah listened carefully as the scanning sounds moved closer. Something about the rhythm seemed familiar to her. It was not random noise. There was a pattern hidden in the mechanical beeping, like a mathematical sequence she had studied in class. The scanning device was directly above them now. Its electronic pulses came through the ceiling in steady intervals. Hannah counted the beats in her head. 3 short pulses, then 5 long ones, then 8 short pulses, then 13 long ones. Her eyes opened wide with sudden understanding. "It's the Fibonacci sequence," she whispered so quietly that only Jimin could hear her. "What?" Jimin mouthed silently. Hannah grabbed a pencil stub and wrote numbers on the dusty floor. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. Each number was the sum of the 2 numbers before it. She had learned this pattern in mathematics class, but now she was seeing it in alien technology. The scanning device moved to the next building, and Hannah heard the same pattern repeat. 3 pulses, 5 pulses, 8 pulses, 13 pulses. The aliens were using mathematical sequences to organize their search methods. "I think I understand how their machines work," Hannah whispered to Mr. Kim when the scanning sounds faded away. Mr. Kim crawled closer to her in the darkness. "What do you mean, Hannah?" "They use math patterns to search buildings. If we can predict the pattern, we can avoid them." That night, Hannah stayed awake listening to every sound from above. Each time the alien scanners returned, she wrote down the timing and rhythm of their pulses. By morning, she had filled 3 pages with numbers and sequences. "Look at this," she showed her notes to the others. "They scan in mathematical order. Building 1 gets 3 pulses, Building 2 gets 5 pulses, Building 3 gets 8 pulses. They always follow the same number pattern." "How does that help us?" asked Mrs. Song, the literature teacher. Hannah thought for a moment. "If we know which building they will scan next, we can move to a building they already finished. They don't scan the same place twice in one day." When the aliens returned that afternoon, Hannah listened carefully to their scanning pattern. She counted the buildings and predicted which one they would search next. "Now," she whispered, "we need to move to Building 7. They finished scanning it this morning." Mr. Kim looked doubtful, but they had no other options. Quietly, the group climbed the basement stairs and crept through the empty hallways of the school. Hannah led them through a hole in the wall that connected to the building next door. They made it safely just as the alien scanners reached their old hiding place. Through the window, Hannah watched the mechanical devices search the empty basement where they had been hiding just minutes before. "How did you know that would work?" asked Jimin with amazement in her voice. "I just listened to their patterns," Hannah said. "Everything they do follows mathematical rules. Once you understand the rules, you can predict what they will do next." That evening, a new person joined their group. A young man in a torn military uniform crawled through their window. He introduced himself as Kim Tae-ho, a cadet from the destroyed Air Force Base. "I've been watching you move between buildings," he said to Hana. "You got past their scanners twice today. The Resistance needs people who can think like you do." "Resistance?" Hana asked. "There are humans fighting back," Tae-ho explained. "We're organizing in the mountains outside the city. We need someone who understands how the aliens think." Hana looked around at her scared classmates and teachers. A week ago, her biggest problem was solving quadratic equations. Now people were asking her to join a war against creatures from another world. But as she thought about her missing family and her destroyed city, she felt something new growing inside her chest. It was not the fear that had controlled her for the past week. It was anger and determination, and a strange kind of hope. "Tell me about this resistance," she said to Tae-ho. Tae-ho led Hana through the dark streets of Seoul in the middle of the night. They moved carefully between shadows, avoiding the alien patrol routes that Hana had mapped during her weeks of hiding. The city looked like a graveyard now. Most buildings stood empty, and strange blue lights from Keth technology cast eerie shadows on abandoned cars and broken windows. They walked for 3 hours before reaching the entrance to an old subway tunnel. Tae-ho knocked on a hidden metal door using a special pattern of taps. The door opened, and they descended into what had become the heart of human resistance. The underground base was larger than Hana had imagined. Former subway tunnels had been connected to create a network of rooms where nearly 200 people lived and worked. She saw doctors treating wounded fighters, engineers building weapons from scrap metal, and families with small children who had nowhere else to go. "Welcome to our new world," said a tall man with gray hair who approached them. "I am Commander Yoon Dae-soo. Tae-ho tells me you have special skills with alien technology." Hana felt small and nervous standing before the resistance leader. "I can understand some of their patterns, sir, but I'm just a student. I don't know how to fight." Commander Yoon smiled kindly. "The best fighters are not always the ones with the biggest muscles, Hana. Sometimes the best weapon is a mind that can solve problems others cannot see." The next morning, Hana began her training. But it was unlike any school she had ever attended. Instead of mathematics and literature, she learned how to move silently through alien patrol zones. Instead of chemistry, she studied Keth technology and communication systems. Her main teacher was Dr. Kang Soo-young, a woman who had worked as a scientist before the invasion. Dr. Kang showed Hana captured alien devices and taught her to recognize the mathematical patterns that control them. "The Keth think in very straight lines," Dr. Kang explained as they examined a broken scanning device. "They follow rules exactly, never changing or adapting. This makes them strong, but it also makes them predictable." Hana spent hours taking apart alien machines and learning how they worked. She discovered that all Keth technology used the same basic number sequences. Once she understood these patterns, she could predict how any device would behave. "Look at this communication device," she showed Dr. Kang one day. "It sends messages every 21 minutes. That's part of the Fibonacci sequence we saw in their scanners." "Excellent," Dr. Kang said with pride. "If we know when they communicate, we can avoid their patrol changes." But learning about alien technology was only part of Hana's training. She also had to learn skills that made her stomach feel sick. How to use weapons, how to move without being seen, how to hurt other living beings when her life depended on it. Lieutenant Naun Hyunwoo, a young officer who had escaped from the destroyed army base, taught her these harder lessons. He was patient but serious as he showed her how to hold a rifle and aim at targets. "I don't want to kill anyone," Hana said after missing the target for the 10th time. "The Keth are not anyone," Hyunwoo replied firmly. "They are invaders who destroyed our world and killed our people. When you fight them, you are protecting every human who is still alive." The hardest part of training was not the weapons or the technology. It was learning to live with constant danger and loss. Every few days, resistance fighters would return from missions with fewer people than they had started with. Hana watched families mourn for mothers and fathers who would never come home. She thought often about her own family during those dark weeks underground. Were her parents still alive? Was little Minji safe somewhere, or had the aliens taken her away? The not knowing was like a weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe sometimes. 1 month after joining the resistance, Hana had changed completely. Her soft student hands were now tough from handling weapons and machinery. Her frightened whisper had become a confident voice that other fighters listened to when she spoke about alien patterns and weaknesses. "You're ready for your first real mission," Commander Yoon told her one evening. "We need someone who can get past Keth's security systems." Hana looked at her reflection in a broken mirror and barely recognized herself. The scared girl who used to worry about math tests was gone. In her place stood someone harder and stronger, someone who understood that survival meant fighting back. "What kind of mission?" she asked, and her voice did not shake at all. The Keth data center stood like a metal mountain in the heart of Seoul. It had been built on top of the ruins of City Hall, its alien architecture twisting upward in spirals that hurt human eyes to follow. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that Hana now recognized as information flowing through the building systems. She crouched behind a destroyed bus with Tahoe and 3 other resistance fighters. They had been watching the building for 2 hours, studying the guard patterns and security suites. Tonight, they would attempt something that no human team had ever succeeded at before. They would break into a Keth stronghold and steal their secrets. "Remember the plan," whispered Tahoe. "Hana gets us past the security systems. We download everything we can from their computers. Then we get out fast before they realize what happened." Hana nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. 2 months of training had prepared her for this moment, but she still felt like the scared student who used to hide in school basements. The rifle across her back felt heavy and unfamiliar, even though she had practiced with it every day. "The security scan happens every 13 minutes, she whispered, checking her watch. "We have exactly 7 minutes after the next sweep to reach the building." At midnight, the alien security devices finished their patrol of the area around the data center. Hana led her team across the empty street, moving in the zigzag pattern she had calculated to avoid the scanning zones. Her mathematical understanding of Keth technology had become second nature now, like solving equations in her head. The building's entrance was guarded by a lock that responded to alien touch, but Hana had studied similar devices in the resistance base. She pressed her fingers against the metal surface in a sequence based on prime numbers. The lock recognized the mathematical pattern and opened with a soft click. "How did you know that would work?" asked one of the fighters, a middle-aged man named Park Dong-soo. "All their locks use the same mathematical keys," Hana explained as they slipped inside. "Once you understand the pattern, you can open any Keth door." The inside of the building was filled with technology that seemed to grow from the walls like metallic plants. Cables and wires formed complex webs between machines that hummed with alien energy. The air smelled like electricity and something sharp that made Hana's nose burn. They climbed carefully through the building, following corridors that curved in ways that made no architectural sense. Hana used her understanding of Keth design patterns to navigate the maze-like structure. Everything followed mathematical rules, even the seemingly random turns and twists. The main computer center was on the 7th floor. Hana had calculated this by studying the building's energy consumption patterns from outside. The aliens always placed their most important systems where power distribution was most efficient. When they reached the computer room, Hana felt her breath catch in her throat. The walls were covered with screens showing information about Earth's cities, its resources, and its people. She saw lists of humans who had been captured, maps of military installations that no longer existed, and plans for something called the final extraction. "Get everything," Tahoe ordered as he and the others began copying files onto portable drives. While her teammates worked, Hana studied the alien writing flowing across the screens. Her months of training had taught her to recognize basic Keth symbols, and what she saw made her blood turn cold. The aliens were not planning to rule Earth. They were planning to strip the planet bare and leave nothing behind. The final extraction would remove all valuable minerals from the planet's core, a process that would destroy every living thing on the surface. "We need to hurry," she whispered urgently. "This is worse than we thought." Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Red lights flashed, and the sound of metal footsteps echoed from the corridors below. The Keth had discovered their presence. "Move," Tahoe shouted, grabbing the data drives. They ran toward the emergency exit that Hana had identified during their planning. But as they reached the stairwell, Keth soldiers appeared below them, their weapons already charging with deadly energy. The team was trapped between alien forces above and below. In the flashing red light of the alarms, Hana saw something that made her heart break. Through a window in the stairwell, she could see into another room where humans were being held prisoner. One of the prisoners was a woman who looked exactly like her mother. "Mom," Hana whispered, pressing her face to the glass. The woman looked up at the sound, and their eyes met across the impossible distance. Hana saw recognition and desperate love in her mother's face, followed by horror as she realized her daughter was in terrible danger. "Hana, we have to go." Tahoe grabbed her arm. Keth weapons fired energy blasts that melted the metal walls around them. The team fought their way down the stairwell, using every trick they had learned during their training. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. They made it to the ground floor, but Park Dong-soo fell when an alien weapon caught him in the chest. Hana watched in horror as the kind man who had helped train her collapsed and did not get up again. The surviving team members escaped into the Seoul streets, carrying the stolen data that might save humanity. But Hana's heart felt torn in half. She had succeeded in her first mission, but she had also watched a good man die. And somewhere in that alien building, her mother was still a prisoner, so close that Hana could have touched the glass between them. 3 weeks after the data center mission, Hana stood before a map of Seoul covered in red pins and mathematical equations. Each pin marked a Keth installation that the resistance had successfully attacked using her tactical plans. The underground command room buzzed with activity as fighters prepared for their next operation. The stolen data had revealed crucial information about alien weaknesses. Hana had spent days analyzing their military structure and discovered something that gave her hope. The Keth Empire was like a giant machine that followed rigid rules. They never adapted their strategies or changed their patterns, even when those patterns were being used against them. "Their command structure is completely vertical," Hana explained to Commander Yoon and the other leaders. "Orders flow from the top down, and lower ranks never question or modify those orders. If we can predict their responses, we can always stay one step ahead." Using this knowledge, Hana had designed a series of hit-and-run attacks that confused and frustrated the alien forces. Her teams would strike at supply convoys during mathematically predictable transport times, then vanish before reinforcements could arrive following their standard response protocols. "The beauty of fighting thinking machines," she told Tahoe as they planned another raid, "is that machines cannot think outside their programming." The latest mission was Hana's most ambitious yet. Intelligence reports showed that the Keth were building a massive mining platform in the Han River. This machine would begin the process of drilling toward Earth's core for the final extraction. If they could destroy it before activation, they might delay the planet's destruction by months. Hana had studied the construction site for a week, mapping guard rotations and identifying the platform's weak points. She discovered that the aliens had built their defenses according to a mathematical formula that prioritized efficiency over adaptability. This created blind spots that human fighters could exploit. "We attacked during the third shift change," she briefed her expanded team of 12 fighters. "Their guards rotate every 8 hours in groups of 5. For exactly 4 minutes and 23 seconds, the Western approach will have only 2 sentries instead of 6. Lieutenant Nam Hyunwoo looked impressed as he studied her calculations. "How can you be so precise about their timing?" "Because they are precise about everything," Hana replied. "The Keth follow schedules like clockwork. They cannot imagine that we would study their habits and use mathematics against them." The attack went exactly as Hana had predicted. Her team infiltrated the construction site during the brief window of reduced security. They planted explosive charges on the mining platform's support structures, targeting points that Hana had calculated would cause maximum structural damage. But as they prepared to escape, something unexpected happened. A group of human prisoners was being marched past their hiding spot, heading toward the alien ships. Among them, Hana saw faces she recognized from her neighborhood. Her old math teacher, Mr. Kim, was there, along with several classmates from school. "We have to help them," she whispered to Taho. "The mission comes first," he replied firmly. "If we try to rescue them now, we'll all be captured." Hana watched helplessly as people she cared about were loaded onto alien transport vehicles. She understood that Taho was right about the mission, but watching her friends disappear into Keth custody felt like another piece of her heart being torn away. The explosives detonated successfully, sending the massive mining platform crashing into the Han River. The destruction would set back alien operations by weeks, maybe months, but Hana felt no satisfaction as she watched the burning wreckage from their escape route. "You did well tonight," Commander Yoon told her when they returned to base. "Your strategies are working. Other resistance cells around the world are starting to use your mathematical approach to predict alien behavior." Word of Hana's successes had spread through underground networks to resistance groups in other countries. Her methods were being copied in Tokyo, Beijing, and cities across Europe. For the first time since the invasion began, humans were fighting back effectively. But success came with a terrible price. The Keth had begun targeting civilian populations in response to increased resistance activity. For every alien installation destroyed, they retaliated by capturing more humans or destroying entire neighborhoods. "They're making us choose between fighting and protecting innocent people," Dr. Kang said during a strategy meeting. "Every victory costs us lives." Hana stared at reports of alien reprisals against civilians. Hundreds of people had been killed or captured because of operations she had planned. The mathematical precision that made her strategies so effective could not calculate the human cost of war. That night, she sat alone in her small sleeping area, surrounded by charts and equations that had become her new textbooks. She thought about the girl who used to dream of teaching children in a peaceful classroom. That girl seemed like someone from another lifetime now. She picked up a pencil and began working on calculations for the next day's mission. There were more alien installations to destroy, more tactical problems to solve. The Keth had made the mistake of thinking that humans were too primitive to threaten their organized empire. Hana smiled grimly as she worked out patrol timings and security rotations. The aliens were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous weapon was a human mind that refused to give up. Hana's hand shook as she stared at the decoded alien transmission displayed on her computer screen. The resistance base fell silent around her as word spread about what she had discovered. After months of intercepting Keth communications, she had finally broken their highest-level encryption codes. What she found inside made her stomach feel like it was filled with ice. "How long do we have?" asked Commander Yoon, his face pale as he read over her shoulder. 6 months, Hana replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe less." The transmission contained detailed plans for something called the Core Harvest Protocol. The Keth were not just planning to mine Earth's resources. They intended to extract the planet's molten core itself, using technology that would crack the world open like an egg. Every living thing on the surface would die instantly when the process began. Dr. Kang sat down heavily in a nearby chair. They never planned to keep any humans alive as workers. This whole occupation has been preparation for planetary destruction. The invasion was just to eliminate our military forces, Hana continued, scrolling through more data. Once they remove any threat of resistance, they will begin the final extraction. Earth will become nothing but empty space and floating debris. The command room erupted in angry voices as the implications sank in. Everything they had been fighting for, every small victory they had achieved, meant nothing if the planet itself was doomed. Some fighters wanted to attack alien installations immediately in desperate revenge strikes. Others argued for evacuating to the mountains and trying to survive the coming apocalypse. "Wait," Hannah said loudly, cutting through the chaos. "There's something else in these files." She had found technical specifications for the core extraction machinery. The aliens planned to build massive drilling platforms at specific points around the globe. The mathematics of planetary geology required exact positioning to access the core safely without destroying their own equipment in the process. "Look at these coordinates." She showed the data to Dr. Kang. "They need 12 drilling sites positioned at mathematically precise locations. If even one site fails to activate, the entire process becomes unstable and dangerous for their ships." Commander Yoon leaned closer to study the numbers. "Are you saying we could stop them by destroying just one drilling platform?" "Not just stop them," Hannah said, her mind racing through calculations. "If we attack the right platform at the right time, we could turn their own technology against them. The core extraction process would backfire and destroy their fleet instead of our planet." She worked feverishly through the night, analyzing geological data and alien engineering specifications. The solution was hidden in the mathematics of planetary physics. The Keth had designed their system with typical alien precision, but that same precision created a critical vulnerability. Here, she pointed to equations covering 3 whiteboards. "Drilling site number 7 is the keystone location. If we destroy it exactly 43 minutes after the extraction sequence begins, the energy feedback will travel through their network and overload every ship in orbit." Lieutenant Nan Hyunwoo studied her calculations with admiration. "This is beyond brilliant, Hannah. But how do we coordinate an attack like this globally? We would need resistance cells on every continent to strike simultaneously." That was when Hannah realized the true scope of what they needed to accomplish. This was not just another raid or sabotage mission. This was a plan to save the entire human race, and it required coordination between resistance groups that had never worked together before. Over the following weeks, Hannah helped establish communication networks between underground fighters around the world. Her mathematical methods for predicting alien behavior had already spread to other countries. Now she needed to unite these scattered groups into a single coordinated force. The response was overwhelming. Resistance leaders in Tokyo, Beijing, London, New York, and dozens of other cities agreed to participate in the global operation. They called it Operation Last Stand, because humanity would have only one chance to get it right. But as plans developed, disturbing reports began arriving from other resistance cells. The Keth were increasing security around all drilling sites. Worse, they had begun systematic elimination of entire human populations in areas near the extraction points. "They're clearing the zones," reported a fighter from the European resistance. "Any humans within 50 kilometers of drilling sites are being killed or transported off-planet." Hannah felt her heart sink as she realized what this meant. Her own family was probably somewhere near one of those sites. Her mother, who she had seen in the alien prison, and her little sister Minji were likely marked for elimination as the aliens prepared for their final operation. She stared at the global map showing all 12 drilling locations. Saving the planet meant attacking these sites and disrupting the alien plan. But it also meant accepting that millions of humans in those areas would die before the resistance could reach them. The girl who had once dreamed of protecting and teaching children now faced a choice that would haunt her forever. She could save humanity's future, but she could not save everyone she loved. Hannah closed her eyes and made the hardest decision of her life. The mission would proceed as planned. The planet was more important than any individual, even her own family. But as she gave the final approval for Operation Last Stand, she felt another piece of her original self disappear forever. Some victories, she realized, cost more than defeats ever could. The morning of Operation Last Stand arrived with red skies and the distant rumble of alien machinery. Hannah stood in the Resistance Command Center, surrounded by screens showing reports from resistance cells across the globe. In 12 different cities, human fighters were preparing to attack the Keth drilling platforms simultaneously. "All teams report ready," announced Dr. Kang as she coordinated communications with groups in Tokyo, London, and 9 other locations. The core extraction sequence began 20 minutes ago. Hannah watched the countdown timer on her screen. 23 minutes until the critical moment when drilling Site 7 in Seoul must be destroyed. Too early, and the aliens would have time to compensate. Too late, and the extraction process would be too far advanced to stop. Seoul team, move to position, she spoke into her radio headset. Hannah led her assault team through the ruins of her former neighborhood toward the massive drilling platform that had been built where her elementary school once stood. The alien machine towered above them like a metal mountain, its rotating drills already boring deep into the earth below. Energy weapons fired from guard towers as the human fighters approached. Taeho fell beside her, clutching his shoulder where an alien blast had burned through his armor. Lieutenant Nam Hyunwoo helped drag him to cover behind a destroyed bus while return fire erupted from their team. 15 minutes until detonation point, Hannah shouted over the sound of battle. "We need to get closer to plant the charges." She had calculated the exact location where explosives would cause maximum damage to the drilling platform's support structure. But that location was directly beneath the alien machine, surrounded by dozens of Keth soldiers and automated defense systems. The resistance fighters used every trick Hannah had taught them about alien behavior patterns. They attacked in mathematical sequences that confused the enemy targeting computers. They moved in zigzag patterns that exploited weaknesses in Keth scanning technology. Slowly, desperately, they fought their way toward the drilling platform. But Overlord Vextar, the Keth commander, had learned from months of human resistance tactics. As Hannah's team approached their target, alien reinforcements arrived in patterns she had never seen before. The enemy was adapting, changing their rigid military structure to counter her mathematical strategies. "They're not following their usual patrol routes," she radioed to her team in alarm. "Something's wrong." Through her earpiece, she heard similar reports from other resistance cells around the world. In London, the human fighters were pinned down by unexpectedly heavy resistance. In Tokyo, alien forces had surrounded the drilling site with triple their normal security. "The Keth know what we're planning," came a desperate transmission from the New York team. "They've changed all their defensive patterns." Hannah realized with growing horror that Overlord Vextar had finally understood how humans fought. The alien commander had studied their attacks and recognized the mathematical basis of her strategies. Now he was using that knowledge to predict and counter every move the resistance made. 10 minutes to detonation point. Dr. Kang's voice crackled through the radio. "Seoul team, what is your status?" Hannah looked at the drilling platform, still 50 meters away through a maze of alien defenses. Her team was trapped behind cover, unable to advance under the concentrated enemy fire. Around the world, other resistance cells were facing the same impossible situation. For the first time since becoming a strategist, Hannah's mathematical precision was not enough. The aliens had learned to think like humans, while humans were still trying to think like aliens. "We're not going to make it," she reported with despair in her voice. But then she heard something that changed everything. Through the sounds of battle and alien machinery, she could hear human voices singing. Somewhere nearby, a group of people was singing an old Korean folk song about courage in dark times. Looking toward the sound, Hannah saw something that made her heart stop. A group of prisoners was being marched past the drilling site under heavy guard. Among them, she could see her mother and little sister Minji, along with hundreds of other civilians who were being moved away from the extraction zone. Her family was alive, but they were being taken to alien ships for transport off-planet. In minutes, they would be gone forever, just as the drilling platform had to be destroyed to save Earth. 5 minutes to detonation came the urgent radio call. Hannah faced the impossible choice she had dreaded since planning this operation. She could try to save her family and fail to destroy the drilling platform, dooming all of humanity. Or she could complete the mission and watch her loved ones disappear into alien captivity. As she struggled with this terrible decision, Taeho grabbed her arm with his good hand. Blood ran down his face from a head wound, but his eyes were clear and determined. "There's another way," he said. "If we can't get to the drilling platform, maybe we can get the drilling platform to come to us." Hannah looked at him with confusion until she understood what he meant. The alien machine was following a precise mathematical drilling sequence. If they could disrupt that sequence at exactly the right moment, the platform would automatically adjust its position to compensate. "You brilliant fool," she whispered, already calculating new trajectories and timing sequences. That might actually work. Hannah's fingers flew across her tablet as she calculated the new plan with 2 minutes left before the critical detonation time. Instead of attacking the drilling platform directly, they would create a controlled explosion nearby that would trigger the platform's automatic safety protocols. The alien machine would move to a predetermined backup position, exactly where Hannah needed it to be. "All teams, change of plan," she broadcast to resistance fighters worldwide. "Target the geological sensors 50 meters east of each drilling platform. The machines will automatically relocate to avoid unstable ground." Around the globe, human fighters adjusted their attacks based on Hannah's desperate new strategy. In Tokyo, the resistance team redirected their explosives towards sensor arrays. In London, fighters changed their approach routes. The success of humanity's survival now depended on alien safety systems working exactly as designed. 30 seconds to detonation, Dr. Kang announced over the radio. Hannah's team fired their remaining explosives at the sensor cluster near the Seoul drilling platform. The alien machine detected the geological instability and began its automatic relocation sequence, moving directly over the charges that Taiho had placed earlier. Now, Hannah screamed into her radio. Explosions erupted simultaneously around the world as 12 resistance teams triggered their devices at the exact moment Hannah had calculated. The Seoul drilling platform collapsed as its support structure failed, sending the massive alien machine crashing into the earth with tremendous force. Through her earpiece, Hannah heard similar reports from other cities. London platform destroyed. Tokyo platform down. New York successful. One by one, drilling sites fell as human fighters proved that creativity could overcome even adapted alien tactics. But Overlord Vextar was not finished. As the drilling platforms failed, the alien commander activated an emergency protocol that Hannah had not anticipated. Instead of retreating, the Keth fleet began targeting major population centers with orbital bombardment. If they could not harvest Earth's core, they would destroy as much of the planet as possible before leaving. Energy beams from space began striking cities around the world. Buildings melted under alien fire as the Keth took their revenge for humanity's successful resistance. Millions of people were dying as the aliens prepared to abandon their failed invasion. "The feedback pulse isn't working," reported Dr. Kang with panic in her voice. The energy overload was supposed to destroy their ships, but they disconnected from the drilling network. Hannah realized that Overlord Vextar had learned more from human tactics than she had thought. The alien commander had sacrificed his drilling operation to save his fleet, accepting tactical defeat to avoid total destruction. But as she watched alien ships preparing to jump to hyperspace, Hannah noticed something the enemy had missed. The orbital bombardment was following mathematical targeting patterns based on population density and strategic value. Even in retreat, the Keth could not abandon their rigid systematic thinking. "I can predict where they'll strike next," she told her team urgently. Their targeting algorithm prioritizes cities with over 1 million people, starting with the largest first. Using this knowledge, resistance cells around the world began evacuating population centers just minutes before alien bombardment arrived. Millions of lives were saved because Hannah could think like an alien commander, even in the chaos of defeat and victory. 3 days later, the last Keth ship disappeared into hyperspace, leaving Earth scared but alive. The core extraction had failed, and humanity had survived its first war with an alien empire. The cost had been enormous. Half the world's major cities lay in ruins, and hundreds of millions of people had died in the fighting. But humans had proven something that would echo across the galaxy. They were not primitive creatures to be easily conquered. They were thinking beings who could adapt, learn, and fight back against any enemy. Hannah stood in the ruins of Seoul, watching survivors emerge from hiding places throughout the city. Among them, she saw familiar faces. Her mother and sister Minji had escaped when the alien transport ships fled during the bombardment. They ran toward her with tears of joy and relief. "My brave daughter," her mother said, holding Hannah tightly. "What you did saved everyone." But Hannah knew that the girl her mother remembered was gone forever. The war had changed her into someone harder and more dangerous. She could never return to dreaming about quiet classrooms and mathematics lessons. 6 months later, Hannah stood before a new kind of classroom. Instead of high school students learning algebra, she faced military cadets studying alien technology and tactical theory. The Earth Defense Academy had been built from the ruins of her old school, and she had become its youngest instructor. "Remember," she told her students as she wrote equations on the blackboard, "mathematics is the universal language. Whether you're fighting aliens or exploring space, numbers will help you understand how the universe works." In the front row, young faces looked up at her with the same expression she once had when dreaming of becoming a teacher. But these students were learning more than just academic subjects. They were preparing for a future where humanity would take its place among the stars as defenders of Earth. Hannah had found a way to honor both her original dreams and her transformed reality. She was still a teacher, but now she taught lessons that could save the world. The girl who once worried about university entrance exams had become the woman who would prepare the next generation for whatever challenges waited beyond the stars. Her classroom was no longer ordinary, and neither was she. But in the end, Hannah had discovered that the most important lesson was the simplest one. Humans were strongest when they learned from each other and refused to surrender their hope for tomorrow.